Welcome everyone. In today's video I'm going to show you how I made some cowboy boots. I made a pattern and it's in the description and it's free to download. Here are the materials that you'll need. You will need masking tape, of course, and I have the thinner masking tape, but the wider will work much better. I really need to remember to put some of that wider masking tape on my shopping list. I have two sizes of scissors, the larger and then the smaller one. And the smaller one's good for all of the little small detail cuts. You will also need some glue. I just use this glue stick. You will also need some food packaging or cardstock. I like the cardstock best because the masking tape sticks to it really well. And don't forget to download this pattern and print it out. First, we're going to make these pattern pieces reusable. So I'm going to cut out each one and then I'm going to glue them down to the food packaging or the cardstock. I like to use the food packaging to glue the pattern pieces onto for the reusable patterns best. While constructing the boot though, I have learned that I like to use the cardstock best because I think the food packaging has a coating and the tape sticks to it, but it takes a little bit more effort. The pieces that I have in this little square are optional. They are for decoration purposes only, so we won't be using them at the moment. And I always save my scrap paper for future quilling projects. You know what? I changed my mind. We do need one of these. I'm going to cut out this little diamond. Even though these pieces are optional and decorative, I tend to always use this little piece when making the boots. And now that all of our pieces are glued down, I'm going to cut them out and use my smaller scissors for all of the little details. We'll start with the construction of the boot first. There are two sizes of the left and right, and we're going to be using the smaller size first. I start off by tracing it onto some food packaging or cardstock, and then we're going to cut it out. And when you go to cut it out, I like to cut on the inside of the line instead of the outside, and that way it doesn't get too big. But if you want yours to be bigger, then you can cut to the outside of that line. I'm making what I'm going to call masking tape material, and I laid a couple of strips down, but if you had the wide you wouldn't have to do two strips, and then I lay another strip over the top to cover the stickiness. If you don't have the wide masking tape, it's okay. This is all that I've been using. You may see some faint lines, but whenever you paint it, you hardly notice them, especially if you press it together really well. For the toe part of the boot, I'm going to trace this onto the masking tape material, and then I'm going to cut it out. Just remember to cut on the line the same way you did as for the inner sole of the bottom of the boot. I'm unrolling just a little bit of the masking tape but not cutting it, and I'm going to lay my toe piece on there. I don't need to worry about these ends being covered completely by the masking tape, but I do want to have that little lip in the front of the toe that will be used for turning it over onto the inner sole. And now I'm going to trim away the extra masking tape, leaving a little lip all the way around the front of the toe. And then trim away in that little inner circular area, and you don't have to leave a lip on this one. And now I'm cutting little slits because this is a curve, and I'm going to cut little slits all the way up to the toe piece. And then I'm taking my inner sole that's cut out of cardstock, and I'm gently using my tweezers and pulling over and working slowly and in small sections, pulling over each one of those little tabs. I'm keeping the edge of the sole with the edge of the toe piece before I fold it over. So every once in a while you'll have to just stop and make like a little adjustment and move it. I know I said that I'm using cardstock, that's my preference, but I have done this with the food packaging, but I have noticed that when you go to pull it over, you have to really press it and rub it really hard to make it stay put. With the cardstock, it grabs immediately. So that's why I'm thinking there must be something like a coating that you really can't feel that's on the food packaging. And I have not tried this yet, but I wonder how sanding it a little bit first might affect that. As you work down the other side, just be sure to keep the inner sole up even with the toe piece. And sometimes your tape strip might get a little twisted or stuck to the other one. but just be gentle and keep working with it, and you can usually get it to lay flat. And as long as you just take your time and go slowly, this part looks harder than it really is. I actually kind of find this part relaxing. I would like to just put the soles, the inner soles, on the boots all the time. Talking about the soles of boots, this is a different kind of sole. I saw an interesting movie with Adam Sandler called The Cobbler. Be sure to check that out. It was very interesting. When you get towards the bottom where the heel is, go as close as you can, and there is a little extra so that you can overlap it as much as you need to. And if you have too much overlap, you can trim it off. After I have all of the toe taped around the sole, I like to take a paintbrush, or I'm using a bamboo skewer, and it kind of sucks in. So I run that around the inside to make it flare back out and look wider again instead of so narrow. Now I'm creating some more of that masking tape material, and this I will use to cut out the top part of the boot. The scalloped edge is the top of the boot, so I like to take the bottom of the boot and get it as close to the seam as possible so that I can hide it in the boot whenever we assemble it. If you have wide masking tape, you won't have to worry about that. If you are wanting to add this decorative scalloped edge to your boot, you could cut it out and glue it on now, or you can add it later if you've changed your mind. I forgot to add fold lines on the pattern piece, but where the little dip in the scallop is where the fold starts, and then it flares down because it gets narrower at the bottom, and it will overlap about 1/8 of an inch. And here I'm just trimming off any little bits that are hanging over the edge. I'm using a bamboo skewer, or you could use a paintbrush, and I'm making sure that I'm really pressing that seam of the tape down securely. I like to face the seams of the top of the boot inward, so look at the bottom of your shoe to make sure which way you need to face your seams. For me, I've noticed that if I push the front part of the body of the boot in first, then I can wiggle and push the heel down in. Then I use a paintbrush or something and I smooth around the edges. I've never tried this, but maybe if you are wanting to slip a doll's foot or something into the boot, if it would fit, you could trim off the front point of the body of the boot before you push it in. To attach the top of the boot to the bottom, I put glue on the sides and glue on the edge, and I'm pretty generous with the glue. And then I just pop it into the bottom of the boot as previously shown, and I press up against the sides to make sure that the glue is all making contact. I make sure I wipe away any glue that's oozed out, and also I put a piece of tape across the back, or I glue it where it overlapped on the heel. And then I make sure that I have a right and a left. And now the construction of the body of the boot is complete. And now we are going to construct the outer sole and the heel. And now, using the wider sole piece, I trace and cut around that. I want the outer sole to be thicker, so after I've cut it out, I then glue it down to another piece of cereal box or cardstock and cut it out. And I still label mine with an R or an L because I got so confused sometimes. I also traced and cut out the heels, and then just like the soles, I glue them down to the cardstock, but this time I do it 4 times. I cut out the soles and then I glue the heels to the soles, making sure that you have the correct heel on the correct sole. And it should look something like this. And now I'm going to cut out the little decorative diamond shape from some masking tape material. And then I'm going to glue it to the front of the boot where it's onto the toe section and on the body of the boot. Something like this. And then I cut out the heel and I glue it to the back, covering up the little seam. But I'm starting to think that this is optional, so if you want to add it, you can. And here's another little option. You can also cut out a circular shape or a circle and cut it in half, and then glue that on the back. Just something to give it some kind of detail back there. Take a toothpick or a bamboo skewer and I lay it right behind the heel, and then I lay that on the table, and I press so that the heel stays up high, but the rest of the shoe kind of dips down. I used these two colors from Anita's Paint, Moccasin Brown and Espresso Bean, but any kind of browns would actually work. I used this moccasin, which is kind of like a medium brown or dark tan, for the body of the boot, and I painted the soles with that darker brown, the Espresso Bean. I knew something was different, and I completely forgot that I mix a little bit of Mod Podge into my paint before I paint it on. I also painted a strip of the masking tape material with some of the moccasin and with some of the Espresso Bean. I did that for the boot straps and also for any of the decorative pieces that I may want to glue on. I'm only going to glue the toe section of the boot first and let it dry completely. The heel will be sticking up like this, and we will glue this down later after the front part of the boot is dry. I'm cutting a really thin skinny strip, and I will use this to cut the boot straps. The easiest way to glue the boot straps is to glue one end of it on first. And in this video, I believe I'm showing myself gluing it on the outside first, but it's actually easier if you glue the ends to the inside of the boot first and let it dry, and then you can just flip it over and glue that last end onto the outside of the boot. So what you're seeing here, do it the opposite. I don't know why I approached it this way while I filmed it. I mean, it's possible to do it this way because I did it, of course, but the easiest way would be to do it the other way. And now that the front part of the boot and sole are dry, I'm going to put some glue in between there. And I didn't have a precision glue bottle at the time, but you could probably definitely use that. And then I set the boot on my table and I press either a paintbrush. Here I was using my tweezers, which I don't think was a good idea because I felt it wanting to, they're the pointy ones, and I felt it wanting to stab right through the bottom. And then you can add some chalk pastels to dirty them up because I don't think cowboys would have really clean, shiny boots. And here's how they look complete. I've thought about bending them more in the front just to kind of give them a worn look, but I haven't been brave enough to try that yet. Here are some of the boots that I created from the beginning while I was trying to figure out this pattern. Some of the toes are pointed and some of them are squared off, so that's what the difference is. And then I went ahead and tried different ways of decorating them to hopefully give you an idea and inspire you to make some of your own. Sometimes they want to come out a little bit wonky too, but that's good because that's just giving them more character and showing their age. And this one I cut out one of that like flame looking pieces and glued it on the side and tried to use my small paintbrush to add some stitching. And I really like the way this was, I believe, one of my first pairs. And then I got silly and tried to make one that was kind of feminine and planted or put some flowers in it. So I hope you will give these boots a try, and if you do, let me know how they turn out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.